There was screaming, structural damage, and a human trying to explain that the massive space creature currently demolishing Research Station Kepler-7 was just being friendly. Dr. Emma Reeves stood in the observation deck's wreckage, clipboard still in hand, watching through the reinforced transparisteel as something the size of a small starship systematically tore apart what had been, until 3 minutes ago, the galaxy's most advanced xenobiology research facility. "This is exactly what we expected," she said cheerfully to the panicked research team cowering behind overturned equipment. "Though I have to say, your containment protocols are fascinating. Very creative." Station Commander Zethval, whose blue-scaled hide had shifted to the deep purple that meant either extreme rage or impending cardiac arrest, stared at her with all 4 eyes. "Expected? You expected this? Well, yeah. You invited me here to study rare galactic wildlife, then locked me in a chamber with what's obviously a void leviathan. Pretty standard predator interaction setup." Emma made a note on her clipboard while the station shuddered around them. "Though I have to ask, was the deception really necessary? I would have agreed to meet one anyway." The word meet seemed to cause Commander Zethval physical pain. "Dr. Reeves," he said in the careful tone of someone explaining reality to a particularly dense child, "that creature has destroyed 17 cargo ships, terrorized 3 star systems, and defended itself," Emma corrected, not looking up from her notes. "Void leviathans are pack hunters, but they're also incredibly social. This one's been alone for months, probably separated from its pod during a hyperspace storm. It's not attacking ships. It's investigating them, looking for its family." The station shook again as something that sounded like a fusion engine being fed through a blender echoed through the hull. "Looking for its family?" Commander Zethval's voice climbed several octaves. "By destroying everything it encounters? By trying to communicate? Unfortunately, most species respond to first contact with weapons fire, which the Leviathan interprets as either playful interaction or territorial challenge." Emma finally looked up from her clipboard. "Wait, you didn't know any of this, did you?" The silence that followed was punctuated by the sound of what had probably been the station's main computer core being repurposed into abstract art. Dr. Nixthor, the station's head xenobiologist, cleared his throat nervously. "We may have simplified the briefing materials we sent to Earth." "Simplified how?" "We may have described the situation as routine wildlife observation, rather than bait the unstoppable space monster into a trap using the only species stupid enough to hand-feed apex predators." Emma stared at him. "I'm sorry, did you just call humans stupid?" "Well, yes. Your species has an inexplicable tendency to attempt physical contact with dangerous fauna. We assumed this was due to limited survival instincts rather than—" He gestured helplessly at the ongoing destruction. "Whatever this is, this," Emma said, walking over to the observation window where the Void Leviathan was currently using the station's communications array as a chew toy, "is what happens when you try to trick a xenobiologist. Also, just FYI, that unstoppable space monster is about as dangerous as a lonely puppy." Through the transparisteel, the creature, roughly whale-shaped but covered in bioluminescent patterns that pulsed like a neural network, noticed Emma's movement and immediately swam closer to the window. Its massive eye, easily the size of a shuttlecraft, focused on her with unmistakable intelligence. Emma placed her hand against the transperisteel. The creature gently pressed what was probably its nose against the other side, creating a vibration that thrummed through the station's hull like a massive purr. "Oh, you beautiful thing," Emma whispered. "You've been so lonely, haven't you?" Commander Zethval made a sound that didn't translate into any known language, but probably meant, "I have made a terrible mistake." "Dr. Reeves," he said carefully, "please step away from the window." "Way! It's clearly trying to establish social contact. Look at the bioluminescence patterns. That's classic pack recognition behavior. It thinks I might be a potential pod member." Emma turned to the research team with the enthusiasm of someone who had just discovered a new favorite thing. Do you have any food suitable for carbon-based megafauna? I should establish feeding protocols. Feeding protocols? Dr. Rixfer repeated weakly. Trust building through nutritional provisioning. Basic interspecies bonding technique. Don't they teach xenobiology at Galactic Research University? The look that passed between the alien researchers suggested that their xenobiology curriculum had somehow failed to include how to make friends with things that could eat your spaceship. 20 minutes later, Emma was hand-feeding concentrated protein blocks to a creature that had been terrorizing 3 star systems, while the research team watched through emergency blast doors with the expressions of beings who were beginning to suspect they had fundamentally misunderstood something important about the universe. See how it's positioning its feeding tentacles, Emma explained, as the Leviathan delicately accepted food from her hands with appendages that could have bench-pressed a small moon. Completely non-threatening. It's showing submission and trust. In the wild, this would indicate acceptance into the pod structure. The creature made a sound like singing whales mixed with a hyperspace engine winding up, its bioluminescent patterns shifting to what Emma immediately recognized as contentment. Magnificent, she breathed, reaching out to stroke the creature's hide. You're just a big sweetheart, aren't you? Behind the blast doors, Commander Zethval was frantically updating his species' threat assessment protocols for humanity. Apparently, humans didn't just lack proper survival instincts, they had actively hostile survival instincts that made them bond with things that should have eaten them. Sir, his communications officer called out, the containment team is requesting permission to activate the trap. Commander Zethval looked at Emma, who was now sitting cross-legged, while a space monster the size of a destroyer nuzzled her shoulder with obvious affection. Activate it, he said grimly, before this gets any worse. But that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was that the Void Leviathan had just started making the deep, resonant calls that its species used to summon the rest of their pod, and something in the deep void was answering back. The trap activated with a sound like reality hiccuping. Energy fields that could contain a collapsing star snapped into place around Emma and the Leviathan, sealing them in what the manufacturer had advertised as the ultimate containment solution for extinction-level threats. Emma looked around at the shimmering energy walls with professional interest. Quantum resonance field. Nice work. Though I have to ask, why are you trapping me with my new friend here? Through the containment field, Commander Zethval's voice carried a note of what might have been regret. Because, Dr. Reeves, we needed the creature to enter the containment area voluntarily. Fear makes them unpredictable, but apparently they follow humans like... He paused, searching for the right translation. Like pack members, Emma finished, which they now consider me to be. She looked at the Leviathan, which was pressing against the energy barrier with increasing agitation. And you've just separated a pack animal from what it considers its territory. The creature's bioluminescent patterns shifted from contentment to something that made the station's hull vibrate in frequencies that bypassed the hearing organs and went straight to the "something is very wrong" centers of every brain on board. Dr. Reeves, Commander Zethval said, his voice tight with the kind of control that suggested barely contained panic. What exactly happens when you separate a pack animal from its territory? Emma looked at him through the energy field, her expression shifting from professional interest to something that might have been sympathy. Well, she said, as the creature's calls grew louder and more urgent, that depends on how attached they've become to their packmates, and how many friends they have nearby. The station's long-range sensors began detecting massive shapes moving through hyperspace, converging on their location, and then the alarm started. Excellent work, team. Commander Zethval's voice carried across the observation deck with the kind of forced enthusiasm that usually preceded very bad decisions. The containment field is stable, the creature is secured, and we've successfully captured the most dangerous predator in known space. Dr. Emma Reeves, sitting cross-legged inside the quantum resonance field while a space whale the size of a battleship nuzzled her shoulder, looked up from her datapad with mild concern. I hate to interrupt the celebration, but you might want to start evacuation procedures. Evacuation? Dr. Nixtor laughed, his scales shifting to the pleased green that meant career advancement imminent. "Dr. Reeves, you're looking at the most advanced containment system ever developed. That field could hold a collapsing neutron star." "I'm sure it could," Emma agreed, gently stroking the Leviathan's hide as its bioluminescent patterns pulsed faster and brighter. "But you're not containing a neutron star. You're containing a highly social pack predator that you've just forcibly separated from its newly adopted family member." The creature's calls had shifted from the melodic whale song of contentment to something that sounded like a fusion reactor having an existential crisis. The station's hull vibrated in sympathy, and several non-critical systems flickered. "Family member!" Commander Zethval's celebration deflated slightly. "Dr. Reeves, you've known the creature for 37 minutes. 37 minutes is a lifetime in predator-pack dynamics. Watch its positioning. See how it's keeping its body between me and the energy field? Classic protective stance. And the bioluminescence pattern indicates—" Emma paused, checking her readings. Oh, that's not good." "What's not good?" Dr. Nixthor demanded. "It's broadcasting a distress call. Specifically, a pod member under attack by hostile forces distress call." Emma looked up at the research team with the expression of someone delivering very bad news. "In Leviathan social structure, this is basically a declaration of war." The station shuddered, and this time it wasn't from the creature's vocalizations. Something was hitting the containment field from the outside. "That's impossible," Chief Engineer Vorthak protested, checking his readouts. "The field extends in all directions. Nothing can physically contact the—" His statement was interrupted by the sound of something very large and very angry hitting the energy barrier, with enough force to make the entire station lurch sideways. Through the observation windows they could see the Leviathan had positioned itself with its back to Emma, massive tentacles spread in what was unmistakably a defensive posture. Its calls had shifted again, to something that bypassed the universal translators and spoke directly to the part of every sapient brain that recognized the sound of something preparing for violence. "Fascinating," Emma said, making notes while the station bucked around her. "The field's quantum resonance is actually amplifying its distress calls. You've essentially built the galaxy's most expensive emergency beacon." "Dr. Reeves." Commander Zethval's voice was tight with the kind of control that meant someone was about to start shooting things. "What exactly is hitting our containment field?" Emma consulted her datapad as another impact sent shockwaves through the station's superstructure. "Based on the response patterns and impact force, I'd say roughly 6 to 8 adult Leviathans, probably the rest of its pod, responding to the distress call." "The rest of its pod?" "Oh yes, they're pack hunters, remember? One doesn't just wander off alone unless something's gone very wrong. Now that they've found their missing family member—" Emma gestured at the energy field that was starting to show stress fractures under repeated impacts. "Well, they're not happy about the circumstances." The creature inside the containment field had begun what Emma recognized as threat display behavior. Its bioluminescent patterns shifted to deep reds and oranges, and its tentacles moved in complex patterns that somehow managed to look both beautiful and absolutely terrifying. "It's trying to break out," Chief Engineer Vorthak reported, his voice climbing toward panic. "But that's impossible. The field generators are rated for—" He was cut off by the sound of quantum energy discharge as something that definitely shouldn't have been possible happened to the containment field. Hairline cracks of light began spreading across the energy barrier, like a spider web made of pure physics. "How is it doing that?" Dr. Nixthor whispered. Emma looked up from her notes with the expression of someone explaining basic arithmetic to a child. "It's not doing anything. Its podmates are systematically destabilizing the field's quantum matrix using coordinated harmonic resonance. In plain language, they're singing your containment field to death." Emma paused as another impact sent vibrations through the deck plating. "And they're very good at it." The observation deck's emergency lighting activated as the main power grid flickered under the assault. Through the crackling energy field they could see the Leviathan's protective posture becoming more aggressive as the stress fractures widened. "Emergency evacuation protocols are now in effect," the station's computer announced in the calm, soothing voice that all AI designers seemed to think was appropriate for life-threatening situations. All personnel report to evacuation pods. This is not a drill. We can't evacuate, Commander Zethval protested. This creature is the most significant xenobiological discovery in galactic history. It's also about to be free, Emma pointed out, as the containment field flickered like a dying light bulb. And when it is, you're going to have 8 very angry Leviathans with a legitimate grievance against your research station. What kind of grievance? The kind where you trapped their family member in what they perceive as a hostile cage. Emma stood up, brushing dust from her clothes as the station shook again. In pack predator psychology, this is equivalent to an act of war. Chief Engineer Vorthak's readings were painting a picture that no one wanted to see. Sir, structural integrity is down to 60% and falling. The field generators are overloading and we're detecting massive gravitational anomalies throughout the station. Gravitational anomalies? The Leviathans are using coordinated mass displacement to create resonance cascades in the station's superstructure, Emma explained helpfully. Basically, they're using their own bodies as tuning forks to find the frequency that makes your station fall apart. Through the observation windows, they could see shapes moving in the darkness beyond the station. Massive, bioluminescent forms that dwarfed even the creature in the containment field. How many of them are there? Commander Zethval asked weakly. Emma checked her scanners. Based on the harmonic patterns, I'd estimate 8 adults and... She paused, double-checking her readings. 3 juveniles. So this is actually a family unit, not just a hunting pod. What's the difference? Hunting pods will retreat if the cost becomes too high. Families will keep fighting until everyone's safe or everyone's dead. Emma looked at the research team with something that might have been sympathy. You didn't just trap a predator. You trapped someone's child. The containment field collapsed with a sound like reality taking a deep breath and deciding it had had enough for one day. What happened next made galactic history, and not in a good way. Release the containment field, Commander Zethval ordered, his voice carrying the kind of resignation usually reserved for funeral directives. Sir? Chief Engineer Vorthak's eye stalks swiveled in confusion. Did you say release? The field's collapsing anyway, and Dr. Reeve is right. We're about to have 8 very angry space whales treating our research station like a piñata. Maybe if we release their family member voluntarily, they'll leave peacefully. The containment field dissolved with a whisper of displaced energy, and, for a moment, everyone held their breath. The Leviathan didn't flee. Instead, it immediately curled its massive body around Emma in a protective spiral, its bioluminescent patterns shifting to what she recognized as intense relief mixed with defensive alertness. There we go, Emma said cheerfully, running her hands along the creature's hide as if inspecting a house pet. Much better. You were getting stressed in there, weren't you? Through the observation windows, the research team watched in fascination and horror as Dr. Emma Reeves conducted what appeared to be a routine veterinary examination on a creature that had been demolishing their station moments before. Dr. Reeves, Commander Zethval called through the intercom, his voice carefully controlled. Perhaps you could encourage your friend to leave before its family decides to finish what they started. Can't do that, Emma replied, gently probing along the creature's massive flank. Look at these abrasions along its dorsal ridge. Poor thing's been scraping against ship hulls trying to get their attention. And these stress patterns in the bioluminescence, classic symptoms of pack separation anxiety. You're giving it a medical exam, field assessment, basic xenobiological protocol when dealing with potentially injured fauna. Emma made notes on her datapad, while the Leviathan held perfectly still, occasionally rumbling in what sounded remarkably like a contented purr. The good news is nothing seriously damaged. The bad news is that this confirms my earlier hypothesis, which was, this one wasn't attacking shipping lanes. It was trying to communicate with them. Emma looked up from her examination, her expression serious for the first time since arriving at the station. Void Leviathans navigate by following quantum wake signatures, basically the trails that ships leave in hyperspace. When this one got separated from its pod, it started following the most prominent wake signatures it could find. Commercial shipping routes, Dr. Nixthor realized. Exactly. It was essentially asking every ship it encountered, "Have you seen my family?" Unfortunately, most species respond to first contact with weapons fire, which the Leviathan interpreted as either territorial aggression or an invitation to play. The station shuddered again as something massive moved past the observation windows. Through the transparent steel, they could see shapes in the darkness, enormous, graceful forms that moved with the kind of deliberate purpose that made the smart members of the research team start calculating evacuation routes. "Dr. Reeve," Commander Zethveld's voice had acquired the tight quality of someone trying very hard not to panic, "the rest of the pod is still out there, and they don't look particularly friendly." "Well, no. You did just trap one of their family members in what they perceived as a hostile cage." Emma continued her examination, while the Leviathan's protective posture became more pronounced. "From their perspective, you've committed an act of aggression against a pod member. They're probably trying to decide whether you're a threat to be eliminated or a rival pack to be driven off. What's the difference? Threats get eaten. Rival packs just get their territory destroyed and their resources scattered." Emma paused in her note-taking. "Actually, I'm not sure which would be worse for you." Through the station's hull, they could hear something that sounded like a conversation conducted in the language of tectonic shifts and stellar collapse. The Leviathan Emma was examining responded with its own vocalizations, and the quality of the sound outside changed subtly. "What are they saying?" Dr. Nixter asked. "My friend here is explaining that I'm part of its pod now and that you released it voluntarily rather than continuing the hostility." Emma made another note. "The good news is that they're willing to consider this a misunderstanding rather than an act of war. And the bad news? The bad news is that they've now claimed this entire region of space as their territory, with me as the local pack representative." Emma looked up at the observation deck with an expression that might have been apologetic. "Congratulations, gentlemen. You've just established humanity's first interstellar predator alliance." The space around the research station suddenly filled with bioluminescent giants. 6 adult leviathans emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, their massive forms dwarfing the station like minnows swimming around a whale. Each one was easily the size of a dreadnought, their hide patterns pulsing in complex communications that made the station's hull vibrate like a tuning fork. "Sweet mercy of the void," Commander Zethval whispered. "How many of them are there?" 8 adults total, plus 3 juveniles that are—" Emma checked her scanners. "About the size of heavy cruisers, so this is definitely a full family pod." She waved cheerfully at the observation deck as the creatures arranged themselves in a protective formation around the station. "The juveniles are hanging back until the adults determine if you're safe to be around." "Safe to be around?" Chief Engineer Vorthak's voice cracked. "We're worried about whether we're safe to be around them." "Oh, you're perfectly safe," Emma assured him, "as long as you don't do anything that could be interpreted as threatening to their new pod member." "Their new pod member being you?" "Their new pod member being me." Emma scratched behind what might have been the Leviathan's ear, causing it to make sounds that no creature that size should have been able to make. "Which means this section of space is now under Leviathan protection. Any ship that enters their territory will be subject to pack inspection to determine whether it poses a threat to pod members." The implications of this statement hit the research team like a cascade of falling dominoes. "Dr. Reeves," Commander Zethval said slowly, "are you telling us that these creatures have just established a protection racket around human shipping lanes?" "More like a family adoption program," Emma corrected. "Though I suppose from the outside, the practical effects might be similar." Through the observation windows they watched as the massive forms of 8 void leviathans settled into patrol patterns around the research station, their bioluminescent communications creating a light show that could probably be seen from 3 star systems away. But that wasn't the terrifying part. The terrifying part was the message that had just arrived from Galactic Shipping Command. 17 different cargo vessels were reporting friendly escort by massive unidentified creatures, and none of them were asking for rescue. And then the real communications started. "Dr. Reeves," Commander Zethval's voice carried through the intercom with the careful tone of someone trying to negotiate with natural disasters. "We need you to translate." Emma looked up from where she was scratching behind her Leviathan's massive eye ridge, causing the creature to produce sounds like a diesel engine purring. Translate what? They're communicating with us directly. Through the observation windows, the research team could see the pod of leviathans had arranged themselves in what was unmistakably a conference formation around the station. Their bioluminescent patterns pulsed in complex sequences, while deep, harmonic vocalizations thrummed through the hull in frequencies that bypassed hearing and went straight to the spine. Or that, Emma said, consulting her datapad, as her companion nuzzled her shoulder with an appendage the size of a shuttle. They want to establish formal diplomatic contact. Specifically, they want to discuss reparations for the capture and imprisonment of a pod member, territorial agreements for this sector, and protection protocols for their newly adopted pack. Their newly adopted pack being humanity in general, but starting with any humans in this region of space. Emma made notes while absently petting several tons of apex predator. They're also expressing concern about the welfare of other pod members who may have been captured by similar research operations. Commander Zethval felt his career taking another step toward the airlock. Other pod members? Oh, yes. This wasn't the first Leviathan to go missing, was it? Your research proposal mentioned multiple specimens and ongoing capture protocols. Emma's voice carried the kind of academic interest that usually preceded very bad news. Where are the others? The silence that followed was punctuated by the increasingly agitated communications from 8 creatures that could individually dismantle a space station. Dr. Nixthor, Commander Zethval said slowly, "Please tell me we don't have other Leviathans in captivity." Dr. Nixthor's scales shifted through several colors that didn't bode well for anyone. Research Station Kepler-12 has 2 specimens, Station Vega Prime has 3, and the mobile research platform Endeavour has been tracking a pod for the past 6 months. "Oh dear," Emma said, looking up from her datapad with genuine concern. "They know about all of those." "They know? Void Leviathans share quantum-entangled neural networks across vast distances. What one experiences, they all experience to some degree. Every capture, every experiment, every—" Emma paused, checking the increasingly urgent communications from the pod. "Every death." The harmonic vocalizations from outside the station shifted to something that made the hull plates vibrate in patterns that felt distinctly like barely controlled rage. "Dr. Reeves," Commander Zethval's voice was barely steady. "What exactly are they telling us?" Emma listened to the complex whale song for a moment, her expression growing increasingly troubled. "They're explaining that they've been systematically tracking and investigating every research station that has captured their kind. They have complete intelligence on Galactic Research Command's xenobiology programs, including facility locations, capture methods, and—" She paused, double-checking her translation, "correctity reports." "Casualty reports?" 17 Leviathans have died in captivity over the past 2 years. The pod considers this to be an ongoing act of war against their species. Emma looked up at the observation deck. "They want to know if you're willing to negotiate a peaceful resolution, or if they should proceed with what they call justice protocols." "What are justice protocols?" Before Emma could answer, the station's long-range sensors lit up with contacts. Dozens of massive signatures were emerging from hyperspace throughout the sector, not just around Research Station Kepler-7, but around every facility mentioned in Dr. Nixthorpe's uncomfortable confession. "They're everywhere," Chief Engineer Vorthak whispered, staring at his displays. "Every research station, every mobile platform. How many of them are there?" "Based on the quantum resonance patterns, I'd estimate somewhere between 200 and 300 adult Leviathans plus juveniles." Emma's voice carried the clinical detachment of someone reporting weather data rather than an extinction event. "Apparently, when you systematically capture and kill members of a highly intelligent pack species, they tend to organize a coordinated response." The communications from the pod outside shifted again, and Emma's expression became more serious. "They're offering terms," she said. "Immediate release of all captured Leviathans, cessation of hostile research activities, formal recognition of their territorial claims in this sector, and reparations for the deaths of their pod members. And if we refuse? Emma listened to another complex sequence of harmonics and bioluminescent patterns. They stop considering you a potentially rational species and proceed with what they call traditional pack justice for the murder of family members. Commander Zethval looked around at his research team, all of whom were displaying the body language of beings who had suddenly realized they were prey animals. Dr. Reeves, he said carefully, in your professional opinion, should we accept their terms? In my professional opinion, Emma replied, while her Leviathan companion made protective rumbling sounds, you should have started with diplomacy instead of kidnapping. But yes, I'd strongly recommend accepting their terms before they decide that talking is pointless. The negotiations that followed were conducted through Emma, who found herself in the unprecedented position of being humanity's first interstellar diplomatic translator for a species that communicated through quantum harmonics and could dismantle space stations with their bare tentacles. 6 months later, the galaxy had adapted to its new reality in ways that no one could have predicted. Human shipping lanes had become the safest transportation corridors in known space, patrolled by creatures that considered every human crew member part of their extended family. Piracy in human-controlled sectors had dropped to zero, largely because the pirates' ships kept getting escorted to the nearest Galactic Authority station by helpful Leviathans. Trade with human colonies had increased by 400%, as alien merchants discovered that routes protected by apex predators were remarkably free of the usual hazards of interstellar commerce. Dr. Emma Reeves had been promoted to Director of Interspecies Relations, a position that mostly involved explaining to various galactic governments that, no, humans had not intentionally weaponized space whales, and yes, the Leviathans really did consider cargo ship crews to be honorary pod members. It's actually quite simple, she explained to the Galactic Commerce Council during one of their regular How Do We Deal with the Space Whale Situation meetings. Treat human ships with respect, don't threaten crew members, and the Leviathans will ignore you completely. Try to attack human vessels and… She shrugged. Well, you've seen the reports. The reports in question detailed 17 separate incidents where hostile forces had encountered Leviathan protection protocols. None of the incidents had resulted in casualties, largely because the attacking vessels had immediately surrendered upon discovering they were outnumbered by creatures the size of battleships. The most important thing to remember, Emma continued, is that they're not human pets or weapons. They're an independent sapient species that has chosen to form a symbiotic relationship with humanity based on mutual respect and shared social structures. What she didn't mention was that the Leviathans had also quietly shared their star charts with human explorers, opening up regions of space that no other species had ever successfully mapped, or that they had begun teaching human children their language during what they called pod education sessions, or that the youngest Leviathans had started referring to humans as the little cousins who feed us and tell good stories. The galaxy was learning to coexist with the fact that humanity had accidentally adopted the most powerful species in known space simply by being nice to a lonely space whale, and Emma still thought they were just doing basic xenobiology.